So who I was when I was 14 is different than who I was when I was 18 compared to who I am when I'm 40.
Yeah.
Like it just constantly is this fluid movement. And I kind of love that.
Welcome to the Carla Rand Show, a weekly podcast designed to dig into the lives of everyday people. People who are making a positive impact, people who have risen above and overcome obstacles. Insights and stories from ordinary individuals who inspire us all towards the truly extraordinary. Here's your host.
Hey, it's Carla. I just got the opportunity to talk to a friend of mine, Angie Smith, and Angie's just a sweet lady. She has so much good things to share. We talked about leadership. We talked about a devastating experience that she had when she was only 15, where her stepdad and her mom got killed in a car accident. So we got into that a little bit, talked about that, and talked about the impact that can have. And she has such a heart for teens. So we also talked about the ministry that she's doing with teens right now and how her heart and her passion is like all around that and how she just really resonates with these teens. And so it was really good to hear her perspective. And I know you're going to love this conversation. All right, well, welcome to the show. Angie Smith is my guest today. And Angie, I'm so happy to have you here. I reached out to you for some really specific reasons that we'll talk about. One of the things was leadership that I wanted to talk to you about, but I also just wanted to hear your story and learn from you. So welcome, Angie. I'm so glad you're here.
Well, thanks, Carla.
You're welcome. And where are you living now? Can you tell us a little bit about what we'll do is we'll talk about what you're doing right now a little bit, and then we'll go back to your childhood. Does that sound good?
For sure. Sounds
Okay.
good. Okay, so where am I? We were in Alberta like 3 months ago and uprooted our whole family and moved all the way to just outside of Montreal. We're like 20 minutes from the city. So that's where we are. We're here because we came to do missions work. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. And so the mission work that you're doing, just give us a quick little snapshot of what that looks like. What are you guys doing right now? Or what's your goal?
Sure. So we're part of Operation Mobilization. And I have taken on the Teen Street directorship role, which sounds really impressive. But basically, what it is I love youth and I am so excited and passionate about helping them become the best versions of themselves, about helping them to understand what their calling is and have courage and belief in that. And so, with this fun title, it just means that I get to do that every day. I get to help set up events and organize leadership in a way that will empower youth. And I get to do that in our very own country, which is amazing.
Yeah, and I want to get into more of that, like what you have to say to youth and that kind of stuff, because I think that, your experience and your training can really speak into that. But let's go back a little bit and let people have some context. I'll just give some quick context. So the way that Angie and I, we kind of were in similar church circles, but we never went to the exact same church. So like we wouldn't see each other a lot, a little bit through schooling and stuff too. But actually the way that I connected with you the most was when you were doing kind of the beach body thing. So you were like teaching workouts and stuff, and I was teaching workouts, and you actually subbed for me at least one or two occasions where you subbed, I think, for my fitness classes, and you actually were coming to my fitness classes for a while too. So I think we connect a little bit on that level because you're actually a figure skater, right? And you've taught figure skating and you've done fitness stuff, and so that's kind of how. So you've got a lot of dimensions to you, Angie. Like there's a lot going on, right? But just tell us a little bit about like where you grew up, what that was like, maybe a little bit about your school. Give some context to who you are.
Wow. Okay. So I'm old, so this is going to take me a while. I got to go back a little ways.
You're not that old. It's relative. It's relative. But yeah, go ahead. Just tell us a little bit like where you grew up and a little bit about your family, stuff like that.
Sure. Okay. So I grew up in central Alberta, kind of. I mean, our family moved all the time. Every second year we were moving. And so there was lots of change, lots of transitions in my life as I was growing up. I did not grow up in a Christian home. And I think I was about 14 when my parents divorced. And in walks in this handsome stepfather type figure into my mom's life for me, not her stepfather, my stepfather. Sorry, just to clarify, that sounded really weird. And he was Christian. And it was at that point he decided that my brother and I needed to know God and learn about the Bible. And I mean, I had been going through quite a bit. And so I was a bit hesitant and kind of, I was rebellious teen. How about there? We'll
Yeah.
just say those words. And I didn't make his life really easy, but he was an incredible man. He didn't give up. He was such an amazing father figure. And I really learned a lot from him. And I mean, I didn't even have him a long time in my life. Um, 9 months later, him and my mom were both killed in a car accident. And I remember that night sitting in my room and contemplating everything that had just occurred. And I thought, okay, if this is the God that he says I have, like my stepdad, I can't do this life. I can't do this struggle on my own. I was an incredibly independent and strong willed person, but I couldn't get through this by myself. And so it was in that moment that I totally just gave it to God and was like, God, I, I need you in this space, and invited him in. And I mean, he didn't fix everything. I didn't get my mom back, my best friend, she didn't come back in the room, but what I got was this peace and this courage to keep moving forward.
Mm.
And so from there, I didn't have everything figured out. I was still this teenager that was lost. But I stepped forward and I kept going forward. And, I got through that space. I finished high school. I couldn't wait to be done high school and get out of there, away from all the memories that were attached to the space, and start over. And so I moved up to Edson and started over, met my, knight in shining armor, who happened to be Barry, and from there, we just kept evolving. We kept growing in our Christian space. We kept exploring what that meant for us. We had our first baby and we were thrilled. And then we decided that, well, okay, we didn't decide. We felt that we'd heard from God that it was time to go into missions for the first time. And so, much to our family's dismay, we took their first and only grandchild at the time. I moved to Kenya for a year, raised him for a year on the field. He had his 4th birthday there. We discovered scorpions for the first time and ate the first amazing mango in our life. And it was just amazing. And then came back to Canada. I went back into coaching skating, and I took some time to take care of my grandparents, who had been very instrumental in my life, especially after my mom had passed away, and was there for them while they went through their end parts of life, and I got to just be there right till the end with them. And that in itself was quite an interesting time, to learn what living with dementia was like. And so for the final 2 years of my grandmother's life, I did everything for her. I was there, she lived in the lodge, and the healthcare providers were amazing, and I loved them all a lot. But it was still, I was still the primary caregiver, like where I was in the lodge with her for 6 hours in a day with 2 toddlers at the time, and still trying to homeschool my oldest. And then when I wasn't in her room or helping her do things, I was at home and she'd be phoning, every 30 minutes, to the point where something had to change. I ended up having to put my oldest into institutionalized school, which worked out well. It was a very good school. Anyway, it was great. And I really appreciated the teachers during that time. And I was able to then finish focusing on my grandmother. And it wasn't much longer and she passed away. But by the time she passed away, then I had, completely forgotten who I was again. You know, I was back in this time of transition. I'd spent the last 2 years pouring every bit of my energy into her life. And who I was kind of gone again. You know, I didn't remember what I was passionate about or anything like that. And so that's when in walked Beachbody, you know,
Hmm.
who just, I mean, that's where I began to like focus on myself again. And what is it that's driving me? What is it that I'm passionate about? What is it that means something to me for
Hmm.
me? So so there you go. Then we met more officially.
Yeah. Yeah, it was
So
cool. And it was cool to see what you were doing with that and how you were working with others. And I think it's such a cool way to network, right? Like when you're kind of starting this kind of business and you're trying to get people in, it's a good way to network. And I'm wondering, Angie, because I want to talk to you a little bit about leadership too.
mm,
When you started the Beachbody thing, you sort of were forced to become a bit of a leader.
mhm.
Was that an adjustment for you? Was that what started your kind of path on thinking more of yourself as a leader? Or did that happen before that?
Hmm. Um, I think the first time I actually had to think of myself as a leader is when I came out of high school. I
Mm-hmm.
moved up to Edson because I think that's when I started coaching figure skating. And so at that point I had to start thinking of myself as the coach, you know, like the one in charge. I'm the leader. I have to maintain safety and order on the ice so that nobody gets hurt, right? So I think that was the beginning part of understanding that I was in a position where I had some leadership, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then I think it was, yeah, it had a lot to do with Beachbody too, because you know at that point I stepped out and I started to try to influence people in a way that was positive, right? That I felt was positively impacting me as well.
Yeah, and you said something interesting. You said about like finding yourself. You kind of had to find out who you were again after you were caring for your grandparents, right? Um, do you think that because a lot of teens go through that, right, Angie? It's
Yeah.
like, oh, we got to find ourselves. Who are we? Whatever. Um,
Mhm.
do you think that we eventually kind of find ourselves at a certain age or a certain experience, or do you think it's maybe more of a journey where you're just constantly kind of getting to know who you are more and more? Like, what's your take on that?
Oh, so So I'm an Enneagram 4 for anybody who knows that, which is like the tortured artist who is always seeking out their identity. So it's like that's like always my constant battle and struggle is who am I in this space that I'm in? And so that question, who am I think is always evolving. I don't think we ever arrive at an understanding of who we are until we're done, you know?
Hmm.
So who I was when I was 14 is different than who I was when I was 18 compared to who I am when I'm 40. You know,
Yeah.
like it just constantly is this fluid movement. And I kind of love that. I love that who I was 20 years ago is not who I am anymore. You
Mm.
know, I'm constantly growing, becoming a bigger and better version of who I was then, you know?
Yeah, I love that you said that because I agree. I think that, like a lot of people, oh, Carla, you've changed. And I'm like, that's a positive thing. Isn't that a positive
Yeah,
thing? Like, don't we? I
absolutely.
mean, it could be a negative thing, I suppose, depending on how you change, but you do want to change. Like, you don't want to be, and I think it's hard for me because I was born and raised in Edson, went away for school, came back to Edson. So, like, everybody knows me as, like they know my parents, they know my extended family. Like, there's very much a foundation here. So it's hard sometimes to break out of that and be like, oh no, I'm a different person. Now, I will say it hasn't been terribly hard. Like I'm okay with it, but for a while there, it was hard. And I think too, like when you're talking about different seasons, like when you're caring for your grandparents, I don't know about you, but when I found maybe it was similar because like when I was raising my kids and stuff, like you're not thinking about yourself through that time. Like when you're having babies and you're up in the night and all that, and because it's so demanding and everything's so urgent. And it sounds like that was similar when you were looking after your grandparents, like these calls every 30 minutes and you going in there to visit and all that. And it's hard to even think about who you are and what you want. So I think it's almost like it's a privilege to get to the point, I think, where you're in a place in your life you can actually evaluate that, you know? Like, I think that's a blessing to be able to be there. So what have you discovered about yourself, Angie? What has been that sort of process for you? How do you think you've changed over the years?
Mm,
Because
it's a good question.
you're kind of a quieter, introverted type of person, at least from what I see. You know
Yeah.
how to extrovert well, but I just like you're a bit of a hard. You're kind of a hard nut to crack. Like, you're not easy. Like, oh, Angie's like that. Like, I've often wondered. I'm like, what is Angie really like? You know, like. So just
Yeah.
tell us about what have you discovered about yourself?
I've discovered, I think the biggest discovery I've come across is that I have a voice. Um, and it's been a hard one to find. Like, if you, I don't, I'm not going to assume you had the same childhood as I did or anything similar, but I know with so many of the youth that I work with, they've been told their story. They've been told who they are, or they've been told to think one way. And I felt so much of that growing up is that I was told all you'll ever be is a figure skating coach. All you'll ever be good at is this lane. Don't try to move out of it. Like, just put your head down and keep yourself out of trouble. Like, that's I was never told that I have my own voice, that I could be brave and I can be courageous and believe in something greater than what I'm seeing right in front of me. Does that make sense?
It does. Were people telling you that, Angie, or was that more your perception? Do you think?
You know, I know some of it was told to me,
Yeah.
but I also understand that a lot of what we believe is just perceived reality.
Mm-hmm.
It's the filter that we were looking at our lives in that like in that situation. It was the lens that I was perceiving through. So I don't believe now that I was always told that I had to do things a specific way, but I was meant to feel like it was always something that I felt like that I perceived from people, which also is part of my personality in that I perceive and feel lots. Big feeler. So,
Yeah. And that's good. I think being a big feeler and being able to see, like, perceive things and be that can make you more empathetic and all the rest of it. But I think it can
mhm,
also take up so much space and so much
mhm.
emotion and energy that I think you can become just like overwhelmed. Did you ever go through overwhelm or like sort of a burnout period in your life, Angie, or no?
I think I think I do all throughout my cycles of seasons, right? There's this burnout period when we're new moms where we're like, oh, I'm just so tired, and all of our energy is going into our kids that we burn out a bit, and then they start sleeping through the night, and things get a little bit easier. I know, yes, you know, or things get tough in what when your expectations aren't met.
Mm-hmm.
I find that I tend to burn out sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, but I always find there's a place you can go back to. Like if I'm really struggling, if I'm really feeling like, oh my goodness, God, I am so lonely right now in the middle of lockdown in a community I don't know, what am I going to do? How can I keep functioning at this pace? And I always find when I give it back to God, He just will find a space for me to breathe in.
Mm.
Like a friend messaging me up and saying, "Hey, how are you doing mentally?"
Mm.
You know,
Maybe I did that. Maybe that was me you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. How can I help you? How can we pray for you, or how can we just support you? And I find those moments are so amazing. And even Jesus walked in the desert for 30 days, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's okay to go through desert times
Mm-hmm.
as long as we remember where to keep our focus.
Mm-hmm. Not to
So,
get completely feeling like hopeless, I guess, to know that there's
mhm.
always hope. There's always a way out. I want to kind of lean into that a little bit. I don't want to press you too much because I don't necessarily want to make you cry or anything, Angie, but you talked about, the divorce, then you talked about your stepdad, and then
Mhm.
suddenly you said 9 months later that you're both, your mom and your stepdad died in a car accident. And we just kind of went on. But that, I was
Yeah.
like, holy, like that's pretty significant. Can you just tell us a little bit about what that was like for you and maybe how that's impacted you?
Mm. Um,
Because some of us are watching and we're like, I don't know what that's like. And other people are watching and they're like, I've experienced something similar. So maybe what are some words that, like, what helped you in that?
uh, it was, well, like I really, hmm,
I'm really putting you on the spot here. Because I mean, I'm just
yeah.
anticipating, like, so there's this young, how old would you have been when that happened?
So I was 15 when they passed away. Yeah.
Okay, so there you are, 15, and all of a
Mhm.
sudden you lose your mom. Like, that would have been a huge thing for you, Angie.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking, like, how did you even cope? Like, how did you get through? Was it friends? Was it family? Was it the church? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Oh,
let's go
yeah.
there. Let's go there. Give you some,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Just
Okay.
like, what direction do I take
Yeah, I
this in,
know,
Carla?
I
I'm
know.
so sorry. Okay. So I'm sitting in my room in the middle of the night, and I can hear the commotion upstairs in my father's house as they're trying to come up with, well, what do we do now, and how do we claim insurance, and all this logistical stuff, and people trying to deal with emotions. And I'm sitting downstairs in my room, and I'm going, okay, I no, I can't do this on my own. So God, I need you to come in and fill this space. And when I felt okay to breathe in that space, it was like, okay, what's my next step, God? How do I move from sitting on the edge of my bed to going to school next week? Because I can't stay here forever, right?
Mm.
And so it was just okay. I need to come up with a plan. What do I feel comfortable with? And what I realized right at 15 was that there is a huge uh, benefit to routine. And so, even though maybe my head wasn't into writing essays for English class, or I probably really didn't care if I got the algebra, I needed to keep making steps. I needed to keep pushing myself forward and keep making myself function as if life were normal, even though I knew it wasn't normal. I mean, and it was hard. I will not begin to say that it was easy. I remember hearing people talk about me behind my back in the hallways, like, oh, her mother must not have meant anything to her if she can just get up and go to school, right?
Mm.
But I remember thinking, I'm doing this for my sanity. Like, I just need to keep moving
Mm.
because if I stop, then it will crush me, you know? And looking back now, my English teacher was amazing because I would fall asleep in in these classes, and he would let me sleep. you
Oh.
know, Probably because he knew how much trauma I was going through and just needed a space to do that. Or I'd look back now horrified as I'm reading my journal entries that I had written to him, and in my classes and stuff, and I'm thinking I was such a mess. like and and he just let me keep being what I needed to be in the moment, right? Just so if I think about things that have helped me, it was remembering to keep routine. You know, Remembering to do the little things. Get up in the morning, make your bed, and eat your breakfast. Uh, put your clothes on the right way, and go out the door. Keep moving. And then it was if I think about what I do now and what I did then, it's write it down. Just open the book and let the pen write your emotions
Mm.
or your thoughts, because then you can leave them and go on to do what you need to do.
Mm.
So I do a lot of um, channeling through just writing,
Do you like to
and
keep a
hopefully
journal?
nobody reads it.
You keep a journal kind of, or How do you write it down?
Uh, well, I have this book, just a like a book. And so when I feel overwhelmed, when I feel like I've got so much going on that I really can't focus on anything, I just open it up and I just write it.
Mm,
So there's been times where I've had speaking sessions coming up where I've had to go in and chat with some youth, like give a message, and I'll have no idea what I want to talk about, like none. And I'll be like, okay, God, you're going to have to give me some words. And I'll just start writing in my journal. And before I'm done my entry, the message is finished.
mm, yeah.
And not in a pretty organized way, like, but I'll be able to go, oh, so that's what I was thinking
Yeah.
when I look back at what I've written,
I do that too,
because,
Angie. And I think like a lot of people, they talk about kind of doing like a brain dump. So like before you go to
yeah,
bed at night, if you're having a hard time sleeping, go write everything down. And so I think there's a lot of power in that. Like whether
yeah.
you're journaling or you're doing it like you're doing at the book, or it could even just be a to-do list. Like tomorrow morning I have to do these things. I better write it down so I don't have to keep thinking about it and trying to process it in my head. But I do
Mhm.
the same thing. Like a lot of times I'll have to speak about something and I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? And I don't do well just thinking. I have to either verbalize it, like talk it out, or I have to write it out. I can't seem to, like, there's only so much space up here, you know? So it's like,
Yeah.
you can only have so much going on. So if I can get it out on paper, that it helps. So thanks for sharing that. I think that's a really good tidbit. So, yeah, I think when people go through trauma, like what you went through, like sometimes that can have like ripple effects. Have you
Mhm.
found that that's had ripple effects in your life? I mean, obviously it probably has, but is there anything that's been sort of maybe like that keeps coming up for you, or anything that you struggle with or that triggers you based on that? Or do you feel like you're pretty okay?
Mm.
Depends on the day, maybe.
Right. Where am I at in my month? No, actually, I feel like I'm in a pretty good space about it.
Hmm.
Um, and not that, I'll always look back and I'll always have strong emotions about it, even though I'm in a good space now,
Hmm.
right? Um, I learned a lot about myself.
Hmm.
I learned that I could be courageous and bold, and that I can do tough things. Sometimes we don't believe that about ourselves. We don't believe that we can do tough things.
Hmm.
Uh, and we really can. Like we're equipped to get through tough things. And I know that every experience we're given is given to us so that we can speak into somebody else. So uh, I did go through a trauma, and it's not the same trauma as somebody else will go through, but I'd be able to speak into them and tell them that it's okay. They're going to get through.
Hmm.
Just stay focused. Just keep getting dressed. Like,
Yeah.
keep doing it, what you need to do. And and so I feel like that is a big part of of what we're made of, right? We're made of experiences so that we can share our experiences so someone else can get through theirs.
And that's why I wanted to have you on today. And I know you were kind of like, I don't know like, what are we going to talk about? What do I have to say? Which is what a lot of people say when I reach out to them. But I really feel like everybody has a story and everybody has something to share. And there's going to be something that you say that's going to resonate with the listeners, right? There's going to be something that they're going to be like, oh my goodness, like I never thought of it that way. Or wow, that reminds me of this experience that I had, right? And it'll help them or impact them in some way. So I wanted to like get into a little bit of the teen stuff though. So like you're working with a lot of teenagers, a lot of young people. Why teenagers? Why not adults? Why not little kids, Angie? What is it about teenagers that really drew you in? Because there's obviously a reason why you're working with that sort of demographic.
Mm. I think because my life changed as a teenager,
Mm,
and it was that moment, like in that time where I really just needed an adult to talk to. And I felt so alone.
mm,
And so that's why we started youth work, I think 20 years ago, is because I wanted to be a safe place for a teenager to come and talk to. So if I gave one teenager a safe place, then I did my job, right? That's where it started. But I love teenagers. I can't even explain why. I just love them. I love their struggle to be adults, and yet their innocence of still being a child.
Mm.
I love the way their brain processes stuff in such a jumbled fashion as they're trying to make sense of it for themselves. I love how they're moving from being their parent, like a, a piece of their parent, into a piece of themselves.
Mm.
That, I don't know if that came across right, but they're no longer just being an extension of their parent. They're becoming their own part of
Yeah.
humanity, like, and of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I love that it's just such a beautiful state to be in.
Mm-hmm. So, what would you say to teens? So, there's some teens watching this, listening to this, or parents of teens. What would you say that teens should know? Like, if you could say kind of one or two things to them, what would that be? I know that's a really big question, but
Oh, that is big. Can I
okay.
like
So,
say 5 million things?
yeah, well, just say a couple of
um,
things. Like, what do you think they need to hear? The ones like maybe in our culture, this day and age. What do teens need to know?
they're seen. I think they need to know right now that they're being seen. That that even though things are going digital and being locked down, they're still being seen. Like, uh, they have so much to share with the world, and they do have a voice that the world needs to hear. Like, they're just amazing creatures. They really, really are.
Yes.
uh, and I feel like they also need to know that they're loved, and that they have a job to do right now, right in their youth. They are an important piece of history, and so valuable. And if we look at every great movement that's ever really occurred, it's all been built on youth. It all comes back to youth. Good movements and bad ones, and we have to choose which path we're going to take.
Mm-hmm.
But as a youth, they have so much power to change the world. So much more than 40-year-old woman.
Yeah,
Like,
I guess I suppose it would depend, but I do agree that like the youth they shape a lot of our culture, right? Like they're very into that kind of they want to be sort of cultured. Adults are more just like fashion whatever, like hey, music
yeah.
whatever, like but I think the youth like they just really like latch on to that. And so I think that's cool that what you said like being seen. What is it like for you? What does that mean to you to be seen? Do you want to just elaborate a little bit on that? Like, I think I know what you mean, but somebody else might be like, what does that mean to be seen?
Well, they're just not fading in the background. You know, they have a place in society. They have a position. They have a job to do. They have people around them to lead.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and and I think it's so easy right now with the way things are going to just hide behind their screen.
Mm.
But to do so would be like, that scripture. You wouldn't hide a light under a cover, but that you would put the lamp on so that the whole room would be illuminated. I fully believe that these teenagers right now are really struggling to understand that they are that light that needs to illuminate the room. And it can be so easy right now to hide behind our screens and Zoom calls and like not really participate, or hang in the background of youth calls, and and just hang out, but not actually feel like they've got a place to break out and do something amazing. And I really feel like that's what we need. Is we need them to know and feel safe enough to do that.
Mm-hmm.
That they can be that light for the rest of the world.
Yeah, and I think too, like a lot of youth, I think they're just like, oh, like I'll just kind of wait till I'm an adult. Like I'll just kind of hang out here. Like there's this space of
Yeah.
like I'm a kid and I'm learning and I'm growing and I'm playing and now I'm, then I'm an adult and I got to work and I got to contribute to society. But when I'm a teenager, I'm just going to kind of hang out. I'm going to just like get away with doing as little as possible. And honestly, I think our our culture and our society doesn't have huge expectations for youth. It seems like, oh, you're not in jail. You must be doing good. Like just these really low expectations. And I think that when you have like if you have high expectations or low expectations, people will rise to the occasion. They'll rise to those expectations or they'll go down to those expectations. So I think part of it is just like, you don't have to wait till you're in your 20s or 30s to actually do something with your life and start leading and impacting people. And I think a lot of youth get this. They get this, Angie, but there's so many of them that don't. And I think that's kind of a tragedy. It's kind of sad because they end up making a lot of, dumb decisions and then they have to deal with the consequences of that for the rest of their life instead of rising up now, right where you are, right? In your youth and doing what you can with
Yeah.
what you have, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like they just need courage or like a little helping hand to get there.
Like a little
You know?
boost, like just a little, like,
Yeah.
come on, like I'm here
Like,
for you.
and I believe in you. Like, come
Yeah.
on. I believe in you.
Let's do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so do you feel like that's kind of part of your ministry then, Angie, is sort of being that kind of hand up, that little boost, that little push to youth to kind of say, hey, like you have something to offer here. You matter. You can lead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I so love about Teen Street is that's what it's based on. It's based on giving them the courage, the hand up, the ability to find their place right now in their youth. They don't have to wait to become an adult to start helping in a food bank or to raise money to change something that they think isn't not right, right? They can make a huge impact right where they are.
And they can even like run a business. They can like lead a movement. They can do all kinds of stuff. I think that in many cases they're going to need some teaching and training on that. So they might need to have sort of a mentor. But there's no reason why like young people can't be doing awesome things. And if you start early, think how much further ahead you'll be down the road, right? And so
Yes.
I think like to kind of give them that power. I probably push my kids too much. Like my expectations are like way up here, like like off the screen kind of thing. And so probably I push too hard sometimes. So that's my thing is like Carla, like just give them a balance. But there's no way like in my mind, like you's kind of sitting around waiting for something to happen. It's like, no, like you got to create that. Like you got to make it happen if you want change, right? So why is leadership so important to you, Angie, though? Like we talked about leader. I know that you joined the John Maxwell leadership team. I did too. I think I told you that. Did I tell you that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's super awesome.
I know. Yeah, that's right. We did talk about that a little bit, just messaging back and forth. So what like why leadership? Why is that an important thing, either for you or just for everybody?
Well, so leadership is such a weird word. People get a little like crazy or weird when they say leadership, but in its simplest form, leadership is just influence. Like nothing more, nothing less, said by John Maxwell himself, but it's just influence. And so if we look at our sphere of influence, it could be small. It could be like I have 3 children at home and a husband that I influence. Or maybe it's a little bit bigger like that. I have 3 children at home, a husband, and a ladies' Bible study that I am a part of. Or, it can grow to whatever your sphere of influence is, to where like yours is quite large in that you have your family, you've got your, outside of that, you've got your church obligations, and you've got your business obligations, and so you're impacting so many people. So your sphere of influence is who you're leading. And I just love that leadership can take on a whole bunch of different forms, and it's much bigger than we actually think it is.
Yeah. And what about the people that say, and this is what I was talking to you about, like before we started hit record, was, the people that are like, oh, but I'm not a leader. Like I'm a follower. I'm not a leader. What would you say? Do we all have to be leaders, Angie, or can we just have like some that are leaders, some that are followers? Do we all lead in different ways? Like, what's kind of your thought on that? I know I'm giving you all these questions, but what's your thought on that?
okay. I have a story on that one actually. So when I was at my John Maxwell certification training, I was sitting at this table where I was all there by myself. Like Barry stayed here with our kids, and so I hopped a plane for the first time ever by myself and flew all the way to Florida for this by myself. And so it was a huge thing. But anyway, so I'm at this certification training, and I'm sitting at the table with this group of I think it was a bunch of American men, actually, all at least 15 plus years older than me. And they're all discussing leadership and, some of the things that go into leadership. And one of the men says, like, something to the effect that, as a good leader, we really need to learn how to submit. And they all kind of like chewed on that for a little bit. And I just got this funny looking grin on my face. And they looked at me and they're like, "Oh, what would you say to that?" And I said, "Well, sorry guys, I think I have all you beat." And they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm a leader. I'm not going to say that I'm not. I'm a leader just like any of the rest of you guys. I lead my family, I lead my husband. Well, I don't lead my husband. I lead my family and I lead the circle that I'm in, but I can joyfully submit to my husband." And it was hilarious because every man around that table, their mouth just kind of hung. And it was like dead silent for a few minutes. And then finally, one of them, and uh, I loved him. He was crazy and awesome. But he looks at me and he goes, "I have to say, my dear, I have never heard a woman say they've joyfully submitted to anything."
Oh, wow.
And I laughed. I'm like, "Well, it's true, like I can be a leader in my own, and I can be happy to submit to the one that's in my leadership." And so, in the situation I was referring to was marriage, but I mean, in other situations too. So, I am a leader in Teen Street, but I am happy to let my OM Canada leaders be above me,
Hmm.
and have their sphere of influence. So I completely lost track of what our question was, but it was like, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Well, no, just about about leadership, like why it's important. I think that's interesting that you said that too, because I think like when it comes to leadership, like I always tell my staff, right? I'm like, I'm not the smartest person in the room. Like you guys all have something to offer. In fact, you have a lot more to offer than I do in a lot of these different areas. So I look at you as the expert, like in tech, or I look at you as expert in registrations, or like whatever their job is. Like they are the expert on the Power Fitness team, and so I look to them and I submit to them and say, hey, what should we do here, right? And so I think
Yes.
that's part of being a leader. Like you have to like, there's a time to lead, but if you're just like, I'm going to lead everything, well, you're only one person and you only have so many gifts and abilities and so much up here, you can't do everything. So I think it's like to be able to say like, yeah, like you submit when you need to submit, and leadership is part of that submitting, right? Like it's not
Mhm.
just like strong fisted, let's just go, right? But I think
Mhm.
it's the courage. Like you talked a lot about courage throughout this whole, our whole conversation that keeps coming up. And I think it's like to have the courage to step up and lead. Not
Mhm.
because, not because you have to, but because you're willing to, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of it's like sometimes we can lead because we have to, like CPR, somebody's dying, nobody else knows CPR, you better get your butt up there and like lead, right? But there's a lot of times where it's like you just have to be willing. Like, you know what? I see the need here. Nobody else is leading this, or I feel passionate about this. Like, how can I help here? And I think
Yeah.
that's a lot of people don't want to lead. So I think there's both things. Some people they want to lead everything. Other people don't want to lead anything. So I think it's kind of finding that where can I lead and where can I submit, right? And what
Yeah.
does that look like?
And part of that comes down to your own self image too, right? Like, I am not that great of a leader that my ego is so big to think I know it all.
Mm,
But I also know that when I feel passionately about something, that I have to do it.
hmm Yeah.
And
How do
so,
you reconcile that drive? Like, because I'm the same way. Like, if I feel passionate about something, it's like, come hell or high water, this is happening. Like, do you kind of feel that way? Like, and like, it doesn't matter the obstacle. Like, I'll just push through. Like, how do you kind of when you get passionate about something, but maybe the timing's a little off, or maybe Barry's kind of like, not yet, Angie. Like, how do you kind of deal with that? Like, do you feel like you're just like I'm going to go crazy. I have to get this done. Or do you feel pretty okay with just saying, okay, like I'm passionate about this, but I'm going to wait on the timing? What would you
You
say?
know, that's a hard lesson.
Yeah.
I think going into missions has really taught me that, to be honest.
I bet.
Because, you know, like when we first were like, yeah, let's go to Africa, we had to wait 2 years with fundraising and paperwork and visas before we were finally able to go.
Mm.
You know, when we decided we were going to go into missions again 12 years later to come here, it was like, we're ready to go. And yet we have to wait because we have to wait for the house to sell. We have to wait for supporters to come on board. And, you know, like, ah,
Yeah. That's tough.
sometimes you
I,
just got to just breathe through it. It's like labor.
Yeah, just like wait on this. It's the timing isn't right. I know our pastor was talking about waiting on God, and I just got angry at that message. I'm like, I'm not waiting on no one. Like that was kind of my idea, right? Like I'm not waiting, but I mean, I know that you're supposed to wait on God, but I'm like, what does that even look like? Like, you know, God can't steer a ship that's not moving. Like all this stuff kind of comes to my head, right? Because I'm like
Yeah.
a driven person. And then there was like, there's all these things that I'm trying to get done, Angie, and I'm like, I got to get this done, but I have to wait on the website stuff. I have to wait on the merchandise stuff. I've got to wait on, there's somebody else like doing funnels for me. Suddenly there's all these people that I have to wait on. And it was like, and I was suddenly like, okay, God, like I get it, right? Like I can only do so much. But it was like just a really good lesson for me that like, yeah, sometimes you do have to wait on the timing of things. And for me, it's super hard, but it's a lesson that I clearly need to learn because that message itself, even though I know it's right out of the Bible, it was just like eating me up. Like this is just not what I want to hear, you know? So I think it's interesting that you're hearing like you got to wait 2 years or longer, right, to get going on your mission trip, even though that's a passion
Yeah.
of yours. It's in your head,
Oh,
you know, like crazy.
like how many times did I journal? God, when are we going to do this? Like
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Yeah.
I'm wanting to go. Why am I still sitting here?
Yeah.
You know, and then I get these visions of, oh, yeah, well, Joseph sat for 14 years before he was
I know.
given his face.
I know.
Can't you wait for 2? And I'm like, oh,
It seems like
humble.
forever. I know. And I think it's like you have the courage. You need to have the courage to move forward and step up and go. But you also have to have the courage to wait and to trust.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And to just be like, okay, like I can't make this happen. This has got to be God's timing, right? And that's a tough thing, but that's such an important lesson.
Yeah. Well, and if we got to where we wanted to be right when we wanted to be there, we would miss out on so much along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Like so many lessons, so many connections, so many people wouldn't have been part of that story if we got there when we wanted to get there.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're speaking to me too because I'm like, but I can like fast forward the lessons, can't I, God? Like, God, like, you know, maybe it takes Angie 2 years, but like, you know, I could do it in a couple months here. Like, let's get on this, right? But it's like, no, actually, Carla, you need a lot of time to learn this. And I'm like, I don't want to learn it. Like, just tell it to me. Like, why do I have to go through the process? But that's how people learn. We learn through trials.
Notes, please. Like,
yeah. Like, let's just get this done. Like, come on, fast forward. No, sorry. Like you're going to have to learn these lessons, Carla. You're going to have to learn these lessons, Angie. You're going to have to learn to wait. And it's tough. So where are you at now with the missions and stuff? So you're doing this Teen Street ministry. Is there more waiting going on, Angie? Or are you guys like hardcore right now, right into it?
Well, okay. So we came underfunded because things just moved when they happened, you know, and so we had to roll with it. So we came underfunded, which meant that I'm doing most of the mission work by myself instead of Barry and I doing it together. Mm-hmm. He has been amazing and self-sacrificing, and he's working at a job, like a regular job, to try and help us get through the financial strain of this. Mm-hmm. So there is some things that we're still needing to fill in financially for us to be here on a full-time basis. But we're getting through that. But there is still some waiting in the fact that we're on restrictions out here, like pretty strong restrictions. So all of the networking and connecting that I had intended to do in person have been shifted to be on video from my kitchen table, you know? And so things are not the way we anticipated they would be. But at the same time, things are starting to move, and they're so exciting and so much fun. Like, I love the job
Nice.
of what we're doing. Like I
Nice.
love it. But, there are parts that are waiting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm waiting on merch too, so I understand.
Okay, you get it. You get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where can we go to learn more about what you guys are doing, Angie? Is there a place that you can go to Facebook? Is there a website? What's the best way to kind of learn what you guys are doing right now?
Ooh. Yeah. So we have a few things going on. There's my Facebook page or my Instagram page is where I post a lot of my own personal parts of the journey. Like you'll get to see my kids and family and, my coffees that I'm having by myself while my computer is going on. Um, but as for like specific Teen Street stuff, we do have a Teen Street Canada Facebook page set up where you can get in touch with us that way and message there. Or we have an Instagram page, brand new, because I'm learning how to do social media.
Yay.
It's a scary place. But yeah, so we've just set up that. And I think that's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me personally
Okay.
is through Facebook, Instagram.
Yeah, and if you have a hard time getting a hold of Angie, just let me know, and I'll hook you up. I'll make sure that you get all the information, all the details. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Angie. I just love that we could just kind of have this conversation, and I just loved how we could just kind of talk about whatever came up. Yeah, we talked about leadership, we talked about trauma, we talked about being a teenager, we talked about all those things, and I think that it's important for people to hear, and it's just fun to hear your perspective on it. So thank you for sharing it, just in such a gracious, sweet way. And yeah, thank you for being on here, Angie. I really appreciate it.
I was incredibly honored, Carla. You are such an important part of our life, and your kids have been so much a part of my journey, and I'm thankful for you as well.
Thank you. This episode is brought to you by my company, Power Fitness Online. We are a tight-knit fitness community, and we guide you every step of the way to get fit and stay fit through our live workouts, nutrition coaching, and incredible support team. Go to powerfitnessedson.com to learn more. Thank you for tuning into the podcast today. If you enjoyed it, please leave a positive review on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Music, or wherever you're listening. And if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, I would love to see your comments. I would love to know what you think about this episode and interact with you. I love hearing from you. Once again, I'm Carla Rand, and this is The Carla Rand Show, and I can't wait to see you next week for our next episode.